World of Warcraft has a patch problem. It has a pacing problem. It has a storytelling problem. Let's get you up to speed. WoW just unveiled patch 12.1, The Curse of Ula'Tek. And while there are some really interesting additions and changes to the formula with this patch, overall, I think it represents one of the weakest elements of the World Soul Saga. Hello everybody, it's your boy Jmulls, and let's take a swig of some spicy water. As is usual, they debuted the patch with WoWcast, a brief overview and conversation with some developers, just going over what the patch is all about. And if we head on over to the website, they give you just a text-based rundown of what's in the patch. A lot of it is the standard stuff, but there is some interesting little additions coming for some elements of the game. The Midnight campaign continues, new outdoor zone, the Coiled Isle, which is that giant island off the coast of Zul'Aman. So if you like the Amani aesthetic and want more of that, this patch is going to be for you. There are some new activities, and they made a lot of emphasis on like the cursed fishing element. Like they put a lot of emphasis on fishing and learning the ability to fish in these like poison pools that you'll find throughout the isle that we're going to here. New 8-boss raid, the Venomous Abyss. Decent name. New 3-boss dungeon, the Altar of Fangs, and they're doing this thing called layers. It's essentially a twist on the world boss formula. You know how you have a world boss in the World of Warcraft, right? I know, shockingly brand new concept here. And then the entire game grinds to a halt as the servers are overloaded and it's just a lag fiesta. Well, remember how they tried to solve that back in the day in Legion? In the August patch where the bosses were kind of instanced? That's basically what they're doing here, and there'll be 3 difficulties: normal, heroic, and mythic. Hopefully it makes the servers of the world just way more bearable, and also makes it so when you actually do a world boss, again called a layer now, that when I press a button, I'll actually see the effects of that button within the next like fortnight. Yeah, I do think it's cool to have a boss living in the actual world, but if you've played World of Warcraft anytime recently, you know this was probably bound to happen at some point. We're getting 3 new delves, including a new Nemesis delve, and a whole bunch of variants to old delves, which are just like Venom and Snake themed. We're getting Midnight Season 2, new Argentina quest, because those have been a massive hit. They're doing updates for like the cooldown manager and the ping system. They spent a decent amount of time going over this one, where for the cooldown manager, you'll now be able to track your trinkets and potions. Good change. And then the things you can actually ping are being expanded, like your abilities, your HP, stuff like that. And I can already tell this is going to be a nightmare for healers because they made a point to be able to emphasize you can ping your own HP. For instance, when you're standing in a venomous pool taking a bunch of damage, to inform your healer that maybe you need a heal. And as we are all aware, healers love it when you tell them what to do, especially when you're standing in a pool of damage. And then funnily enough, arguably the best thing being added to the patch is in regards to housing. That save and export and import feature for like interiors of houses and exteriors of houses, that's finally going to be implemented into the game here. And I quite like the way they're actually going about executing this. So if you want to import somebody's house for your own usage because you just really like what they did, but you don't have every element that they used, you can still import the bits that you do have. The example they used is if you don't have like 2 of the chairs from the import you're trying to bring in, well then it just won't bring in those 2 chairs, but it'll bring in everything else, which I think is a really good compromise. I know it makes a lot of like common sense, but still this is a really good feature for housing. And then you'll be able to get things like little beds for your pets and stuff like that. So there'll finally be some kind of pet implementation for housing. Hopefully it makes the house feel a little bit more lived in instead of like a static thing just kind of existing there. Then we're gonna have 4 new endeavors. The Amani Trolls, Kobolds, Centaurs, yeah, the ones from Dragonflight, and then also the Tortolan because they make a return with this patch. And then blink and you'll miss it because it was only a very small snippet at the end of the actual WoWcast, and you can see it's only 1 sentence here. Continue the hunt for Xal'atath with Eretor. We'll also get an update on Eretor as he deals with the fallout from the Void Spire, and we'll also investigate the resurgence of the Twilight's Blade with him as we continue the hunt for Xal'atath. My biggest problem with this patch overall is just the way that World of Warcraft goes about pacing its story and the way they make decisions about where we go and what we're focusing on. At the end of the March and Quel'Danas raid, when we had that story wrap up for like the reunification of the elves, that was a moment that really soured me on the World of Warcraft story and what they are doing with the World Soul Saga. And then to follow up that moment with say, hey, let's go do this troll patch instead. And the actual follow-up to the story of the World Soul Saga, which we're trying to tell, and we're trying to make it seem as if it's important. We're going to present it in such a way to where it's a very minor element of this patch. And oh, by the way, for the main story of the patch here, we're just gonna kind of spoil a lot of the actual story in the WoWcast. I don't know why they did that. But if you go back to watch this WoWcast, they just spoil massive elements to it, particularly when it centers around the character of Zul'Jin. And they continue to go down a story direction when it concerns that character that I'm simply not interested in. And to me, it goes back to one of the biggest issues World of Warcraft has when it tries to tell a story. Its pacing and its decision making, to me, are very compromised, and it puts their writers in a disadvantageous position to actually tell a compelling throughput narrative. Blizzard clearly wants us to care about these characters, they want us to care about this world, and they want us to care about the World Soul Saga. But they put those story elements in almost as a supplementary element to this patch, instead of saying, hey, we have this well thought out and planned narrative, let's continue telling that. And what this patch ends up feeling like is that the writers were told, we want to do a troll patch, we want to do a poison based patch, write something to justify that. That's how it feels. Whether or not that's what actually happened, to me that's how this comes off. It's another troll patch, it's another snake based troll patch as well. And at this point in time, I just can't muster up the desire to care. It kind of feels like we've been down this road plenty of times before, and it's just another troll patch, despite how interesting the Amani could have been. I want to care about the story, I want to be invested in the game, but if I said I was, that would be a lie. And I think it's such a shame because the premise of the World Soul Saga was so interesting, and I do think it was compelling, and I was on board throughout the War Within. And I think a massive element as to why I'm starting to no longer care are the same issues we went over during the Midnight campaign, what they choose to prioritize, and also their pacing. And like I said, this patch feels like they wanted to do a troll patch, not because that's what the story really called for right now to further the World Soul Saga. To do that, they have a small little addition at the end of this trailer, basically saying, hey, don't worry, we didn't forget about Eretor, we're going to continue that storyline, but it's not really that important. At least that's the way it's presented. Continuing the overarching narrative of the World Soul Saga and Eretor and Xal'atath, that should have been the primary focus of 12.1, not going to do this like filler quest, despite how predictable it was that this was going to be a troll-based patch. We kind of knew this was going to be the case for a while, but knowing that this was going to be the case doesn't make it better. What they choose to prioritize and how they choose to do pacing throughout the Midnight story and the max level campaign, it undermines the themes, characters, and the story they're trying to tell because they don't allocate sufficient time for the overarching main story and for the themes they're trying to tackle, so they end up feeling rushed. They get them over with in the span of a few quests instead of giving these moments and these plot beats time to breathe and feel fully fleshed out. So a lot of the times when I'm playing through the game and I'm playing through the Midnight story, it feels like I'm watching a TikTok summary of a movie done with an AI voiceover, because that's the pacing you get in game. And when you do patches like this and you present them, especially after the narrative that was Midnight, it makes the World Soul Saga kind of feel like the worst case scenario, where they did take a story that probably should have just been one expansion and then spread it out to 3, because you clearly don't need to like set aside an entire patch to further this narrative when you're focusing on whatever this is instead of furthering the World Soul Saga with Xal'atath, Eretor, and those characters. And I get it for World of Warcraft, they want to vary up the aesthetic of the game because World of Warcraft is a gameplay focused experience. It's always been the case, almost certainly always going to be the case. But when you're trying to make the story feel important and you want people to really care about it, you still have to try to tell the story in a compelling way. And to me, that is World of Warcraft and Blizzard's biggest issue when it comes to this game. Even if there's elements of this that tie back in with Eretor and Xal'atath and not just whatever the heck this is going to be, it feels like the ceiling, the best that it could possibly be, will amount to like what Undermine ended up being. Where yeah, there was some important plot progressing elements to that story, but a lot of it did just kind of feel like we're doing a goblin filler patch here. Sure, we're reintroducing the ethereals in a more major way, we're dealing with the Dark Heart, but again, those elements didn't really last that long, and the focus of the patch ended up feeling more like a filler patch with a few important elements, rather than have a story that feels like it's flowing from one patch to the next. It does so by the strictest definition, but the pacing feels so wildly off that it just doesn't land for me. And perhaps this will be way more significant than they're letting going on. But this does kind of just feel like they want to hit a plot point to say they hit a plot point to act as this connecting glue to get us to 11.2. And I think the way they go about telling this story, it makes it feel far too stretched out. Like too little butter being spread over too much toast. Sure, you have the ingredients, but the ratio is so off. As is the case with a lot of like modern WoW patches, you can argue Midnight overall as well. If you're enjoying the current state of the game, you're probably going to enjoy 12.1. It's more of the same, a few tweaks for the better here and there, some cool changes when it comes to housing, but largely more of the same. If you really want more of the Amani stuff, this patch will probably be for you. And while I think the Amani stuff was probably the best part of 12.0, it wasn't good to the point where I'm craving for more, and I'm starting to feel kind of apathetic when it comes to World of Warcraft, and I don't want to feel that way. Hopefully when we get to 12.2 or even the patches of 12.1x or just BlizzCon overall, they can produce something that feels really exciting to me. I'm a bit pessimistic on that, but going back to Northrend with The Last Titan, that has so much potential. I just hope they get it right. Midnight didn't really give me a lot of confidence though. So here's where you come in. Leave a comment down below with if you're still playing World of Warcraft Midnight. What are you liking? What do you hope they improve on in the future? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and also your thoughts on patch 12.1, Curse of Ula'Tek, which sounds like WoW Patch the WoW Patch. I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. And when you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And guys, a new entry in my favorite game series of all time was just announced, Xenoblade Genesis. I definitely freaked out a bit, but hey, I love my Xenoblade. Want to find out about what's going on? Check out this video right here for more. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.